Very well. Awesome. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, everyone. Welcome to our last Office Hours AMA in this cohort. We are finishing the uh, Office Hours special guests with Barnaby here today. Our last guest to send us off to DEF Connect and to the code follow up. So thank you so much for joining today. Appreciate having you here. One last special guest, and yeah, it's an honor. I mean, we had Barnaby a couple times before. I mean, Barnaby was always really nice and open and joined us a couple of times in the previous cohorts, but it's been a while and a lot's changed since then. I believe it's been moving only faster and faster since I think we had you in the cohort 4 last time, so like more than a year ago already. So yeah, before we get into the present and the future, let's talk about a bit more past because I mean, many things changed. So Barnaby today is leading the protocol architecture team. Before he's been part of a rig, and I mean, I remember following your work as maybe the first thing that I followed from you was the 1559 analysis before London, so like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And since then, of course, the consensus and the rig and many things happened. But I'm wondering what led you to this, what you did before, how did you join EF and Ethereum? If you can tell us a bit of your background to get started.
Yeah, for sure. And first, thank you for having me again. Always appreciate talking to the fellows, and it's been great to see from the past cohort people who've stuck into the ecosystem and done great things after that. Like it's been super successful. So yeah, hoping the same for all of you. Um, I've started getting into Ethereum crypto, I guess, around 2018. So at the time I was doing my PhD in Singapore, and it was on game theory. And my PhD advisor happened to meet completely randomly, like Vitalik in an incubator. And Vitalik was like whiteboarding, and there was like a game theory equation like around the Shapley value, I think, which is like a cooperative game. So they were designing the incentives of the proof of stake mechanism that they were working on. And my advisor was like, "Oh, it's so cool! Like I do game theory. Like we should talk." And so he started talking to Vitalik, and there was a couple more people in the room who you may know. I forgot who they are, but at the time, like some of the designers of POS. And my advisor told me about it, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," because I just heard about Ethereum like last week. It was like I think peak 2018, like CryptoKitties or something was happening at the time, so it was getting more mainstream, I guess. Um, and we started like thinking about blockchain more with my advisor, talking to people at EF. Over time, I joined DevCon. I was just like hanging around, kind of at the edges. I still had to finish my PhD, so I couldn't split my attention too much, but yeah, progressively ramping up. And when I was finally done with my PhD, I basically applied for a full-time position at EF as a researcher, and I joined this new team at the time, which was the Robust Incentives Group. So a team that was really dedicated to like incentives and game theory. So yeah, that's how I fell into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barnaby. Yeah, it's I believe it can be a big inspiration. Also, thank you so much for saying that. I mean, you see the fellows from the previous cohort, and maybe we have also some Barnabys in this cohort listening now. Like, I want people to get inspired by the journey because it's been quite a while. Then, I mean, like was it 6-7 years in Ethereum now, and still counting. So it's exciting, and so you mentioned the rig, and I believe some people are familiar with that. But if you can elaborate maybe more a bit on what was the rig team like, and how it evolved to the protocol architecture, like what was your transition like? Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time before I joined, there was a team at EF that was basically EF research. So it was like Vitalik, Justin Drake, Danny, Shawe, a lot of people who are fairly well known. And as the team was growing, like they realized, okay, we have to onboard more people, like, and especially like on specific domains like economics or consensus, and so or security. And so there's I think at the time, so Rig was started maybe right before or right after. There was also like another team, which was the cryptography research team that was started, and another team which is protocol security. So EF research kind of like split into this cluster of teams that was really dedicated to like novel ideas and trying to take that research and put it into production in the protocol. So Rig was fairly small at the start. It was just me and a couple other people. Um, After COVID started, basically a few weeks after I joined EF. So for a long time, it was also like a lot of just like being completely remote, not meeting anyone. It was sort of a strange time, but coming out of that, I felt okay, it's time to like grow the team. I was made the team lead in the meantime, and yeah, I had started to work on the proof of stake incentives. As you said, Mario, also like EIP 1559, I was doing simulations. And the more like I was looking into stuff, like the more it was very clear that like crypto economics is such a big part of the protocol that we need to have like much more people like dedicated to thinking about this stuff. So yeah, over time grew the team until basically 2024, so last year. And then we had like a bit of a period of upheaval, let's say, where for the last year, like a lot of changes happened both in the ecosystem and internally in EF. So one of the main triggers, I guess, is Danny Ryan, who was the research lead of like EF research, left the foundation. And so this cluster of team, which was like Rig, cryptography, consensus, and security, and a team of research engineering, like, yeah, suddenly we were like, okay, what are we supposed to be? What are we supposed to do? Like a lot of people also last year, like they were asking questions about what is the direction of Ethereum, like what is the North Star, like what are we chasing after the merge? So we tried our best like to give these answers. Alex Stokes and I took the lead of EF research. So that was like at the beginning of this year. But then working on this, we realized actually if we want to like ship these ambitious things in the protocol, it might make sense to think not of like there's EF research on one side and other technical teams at EF on the other side, but actually like have like a fully integral cluster of teams that's like both research engineering, and just like make the pipeline as tight as possible. And so in June of this year, we basically dissolved the boundary between EF research and other teams. That became this cluster that's called protocol. Yeah, and since then, like team Alex and I have been co-leading that, and in particular, I've been part of this protocol architecture team that's thinking a lot about like how to put the pieces together between like consensus, networking, mechanisms, and everything. Yeah, it's been like a pretty busy last year, I would say.
Yeah, indeed, it was very busy, and like the whole yeah, I mean, so Barnabe was helping to create a whole new protocol direction of the EF basically, and now leading the architecture. So yeah, thank you so much for explaining all of that. That's sort of the yeah. Also, it's interesting that you joined the EF before the COVID. I have the same experience. It was like February 2020 when I joined, and then I haven't met anyone for more than a year. No conferences, and I thought it's normal. I thought it's like it's all online anyway. So that's an interesting experience. But that was more about the present. Like currently, we have this whole protocol tightly integrated in EF, which is the strong new direction. So now turning towards the future, how do you see the future of Ethereum, or what makes you excited? Where do you see us heading? Like the vision is clear, but I'm wondering you maybe more subjectively, what are you excited about, or what are you looking forward to? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. So one thing that was sort of a personal observation that I think also connected with other people is that the merge was like this very strong alignment point for everyone, like for research, for engineering, for the community. And after the merge, it was like a bit difficult to say, oh, the future of Ethereum is like X. Like many people had like many different answers. And it felt like on the one hand, you had keeping the network secure and just like doing some of these improvements to it. And on the other hand, like you had more like the research thinking about the end game of Ethereum. And I feel like through this process of talking to the community over the last year and like understanding like what people wanted out of the protocol, like we've realized there's kind of a middle that's important, like thinking more about short-term strategic priorities for the protocol. So we have like these three as part of our cluster priorities, which is scaling the L1, scaling the blobs, and improving UX and interoperability. Um, yeah, it's kind of sandwiched in the middle between just like keeping the network live and thinking about like this endgame ossified protocol. And I think to me, there's still like this conversation of like, is the future of Ethereum just like a series of iterative changes that look like we have these priorities and we just try to make these iterative improvements? Or do we have like a terminal vision of what Ethereum is, and then we just stop and the protocol is ossified and we move on to either the app layer or like the infra layer with rollups and everything. So I think to me, that's pretty maybe meta, but what's exciting is like to see this conversation play out between people who think more about like, oh, we have to make the protocol like usable today versus people who think more in like these very long-term decades or even centuries of like Ethereum. I feel like myself, I fell more into like the first side, which is thinking more about like how can we achieve like strong progress like right now. So how do we fix like very glaring UX issues? How do we scale the protocol like so that it handles all the user activity that is trying to get there? I'm personally excited by a few things. So what I'm directly pushing is this idea of like interop, so making it easier for users to like use Ethereum and also like the networks that are connected to it, the rollups. That has so many different like places that need to be addressed. So one of them is just like at the wallet level, like when you have 20 different versions of ETH because you have 20 different chains, like that's really messy. When you want to swap a token that's not existing on the chain, you have to go on another chain, but then you don't have gas on that chain. It's annoying. So there's like very like trivial things, not trivial because it's actually fairly involved to fix them properly, but yeah, basic user problems that need to be addressed. And then you have stuff like way deeper into the protocols. For instance, today Ethereum has like this 12-second slot time, which is the heartbeat of the protocol. One of my personal like priorities is to make that shorter. And in particular, like we proposed a few months ago, like the idea of a priority to like move from 12 seconds to 6 seconds. And so like the faster the base protocol is, like the more like the heartbeat of the network just accelerates, and it just like makes everything smoother and a little bit more responsive. So that's really important. And then even more long term, there's other initiatives like improving the finality. So when the protocol like comes to consensus over its chain data, that's a really important thing that the protocol exposes like to the outside world. Like that's how people know that Ethereum came to an agreement on something. And the slower that is, like the more every other system that depends on Ethereum is kind of not great. And so improving that is also like really, really important. And yeah, I'm excited to just like go through this series of like improvement and just like try to make Ethereum more responsive, like more able to like come to terms with its own consensus and everything. I think that's really important.
Awesome. Got it. Yeah, thank you so much, Barnabe. Thank you for sharing all your visions. Definitely many cool things, many exciting things to look forward to work on, especially for the people here. So I just wanted to get some context from you and get some idea for people to know what we are dealing with here, so they can ask questions. Folks, please raise your hands. Don't let me take all the time here, and take the opportunity to ask something yourself directly. Before we get into the details, Josh has a question. Go ahead.
You talked about the merge and the beacon chain sort of being like the shelling point for Ethereum and developers, a couple of years ago, and how the energy has sort of waned from that. And it seems like the lean chain concept might be sort of the next iteration of that, merge 2.0 or something. Curious, like what your take is on the lean chain and yeah, its future, because it seems like, proof of stake was a thing that was eventually decided that everyone wanted to do, and so there was a lot of energy that had to be put forth to make it happen. But as things stand right now, lean chain is sort of, Justin's crazy idea that people have a lot of excitement about, but at least within the EF, there's not a ton of consensus around it being the actual roadmap or direction. So curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that relates to this model that I was presenting earlier of like, there's this idea of having a terminal vision of a protocol that I think lean chain is much closer to, like the idea of coming to the simple protocol or the most optimal one. And maybe this other side of like, yeah, we have to push through on like just iterative changes that can be very significant, but that are more like, let's just make a series of like local steps to improve the thing as is. And I feel like having both is actually good. I think at the start, like last year when Justin presented Lean Chain, which was called Beam Chain at the time, at DEF CON, I think people were excited, like they felt, oh, it's like interesting, like there's a lot of stuff in that roadmap that's like good things, like there were also already shortening the slot time, getting faster finality, moving to post-quantum. So all things were like good goals and things that we all want to achieve. But I think people also responded maybe a little negatively, saying that this feels a bit like trying to emulate again like this shelling point, but at the same time it's not really what people wanted, which was like seeing us take action today and not like in 5 years. And it was a bit unfair that Justin had one slide where it was the timeline of Beam Chain, and it was a bit like maybe an unhappy format, and it showed like 2029, and I think people were like, okay, we don't want to wait 2029. Like you have to tell us what Ethereum is going to do like next year or next month to fix these problems that we're encountering. And so I think actually it's like now more balanced, like having both on one side Lean Chain that is like, let's think about what the protocol should be in like this idealized world, or where we have like all the time to like really figure out like the perfect implementation. And on the other side, things that are more like scrappy, let's get down to it, strategic priorities that just like move us forward in the here and now. So yeah, that's one part. The other part is Lean Chain is also interesting because it's many things at once. So there's one thing that it is that it's kind of a technical strategy. Like it's saying it's easier to bundle all of these upgrades together and to do them all at once. I think that's maybe a part where I personally feel that unbundling some of that makes more sense. Like for instance, at the very beginning, like there was this idea of bundling the post-quantum transition along with faster finality. In my head, like these timelines are not really the same. I feel like post-quantum might be something we need further into the future, and fast finality is something that rollups are telling us they need, off-chain systems are telling us they need. And so I feel like it's much more critical to achieve, and we shouldn't be like blocked on it. And there's other constraints also that in my sense make sense to try to aim for faster finality sooner. There's this other idea, which is having like this separate thread of development with like the lean clients that's just like plugging at it on their own, like separate from ACD. I think it's also an interesting experiment because I've been like at Lean Day in Cannes. I've also been like in Cambridge. I met like some of the teams. So in both events, and there's a lot of progress that's been achieved. Like the results that they have on the post-quantum cryptography is like super cool. They already have these clients. They are plugging away at like the networking layer, like thinking really hard about, let's from scratch, like what if we just started again today, like what would happen and what would we do? And I think this is actually like a very valuable data, even to inform like the more like short-term work that we do. So I think it's kind of interesting. It feel sometimes maybe in tension between certain things, like you have the lean chain vision of Ethereum, and then you have like different vision of Ethereum. I think we are trying as much as possible to like get the best of both worlds, and I think both make sense to coexist to some extent. But yeah, it's an active conversation. I hope that answers it. It was pretty long.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Barnabe. Awesome. Okay, we already got to the lean there, and Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for explanation. And my question actually following your previous answer, because you mentioned the like scalability and UX UI improvement. All of them I feel is very important. And actually, I feel like the UI improvement already make my life better now. But my question is like ASIM research team is kind of like, you can say it's kind of like a small group of team. So, but the thing need to be done is looks quite a lot, considering Ethereum itself already a quite complex system and a ecosystem also. So, how can you achieve that? What's a specific way to do so?
Yeah, I think the answer depends on what exactly you're trying to fix. So, for instance, like if you want to do protocol changes, it's fairly clear what needs to happen. Even if it's complicated, it's kind of clear. Like you have to write an EIP, you have to get it tested, you have to put it to ACD. ACD has to schedule it in a fork, and then it goes. This can take a very long time, and it can be frustrating, but it is how things get into like the protocol. But then you have like other layers which are not blocked on ACD. Blocked is maybe a bit strong. Like I don't mean to say that. Yeah, it's like blocking, but yeah, it can take time. And for instance, like now I've been thinking about interop quite a bit more. And here you can actually make changes first, for instance, by proposing new protocols or new SDKs that either wallets or apps or infrastructure like can adopt. So one of the things that we've been working on is this open intent framework, like trying to make that a shelling point for people who want to integrate some kind of interop solution that's more neutral than, let's say, the vendors that are out there. And it's not something that we need to ask ACD's opinion on or need to schedule in a fork or anything. So actually we can move faster at that layer, which is nice. There's stuff actually in between. So there is right now, like we're working on something called the fast confirmation rule. So you have like this idea of finality, which is when the validator says like everybody votes and you get like this hard certificate that the chain won't like revert what's been finalized. But actually, before that happens, you accumulate already like many votes from many validators in the process. And there's a paper that gives you like fairly precise guarantees in terms of if you've already seen like so many votes, it's pretty likely that it will going to like it's not going to be reverted, even if you have a very big adversary or the network has like some asynchrony properties. Actually, no, the network needs to be synchronous for that to be valid. But so this confirmation rule is not something that we need to necessarily block on ACD, but it is something that needs to be implemented in the clients. And if I remember correctly, I think one of the fellows who's maybe in the room today has been working on the confirmation rule in Lighthouse, I believe. And so so that's something that is part of the client code, but something that you can just implement outside of, let's say, the regular fork schedule. So that can be also pretty nice because you can just ship it faster.
Okay, thank you. We get more questions coming in. Vukasin, go ahead.
Hi. In case of small local changes which lead us to the future of Ethereum, what is priority now? Is it memory optimization like stateless clients, or is it time optimization like you mentioned, reducing time from 12 to 6? And what is more realistic, and what are we closer to now?
Yeah, so actually we have like these 3 priorities. So scale L1, scale blobs, and improve UX/interop. They map almost one-to-one to like the current and following forks. So if everything goes well, fingers crossed, but I think so far so good. In a month, like we have Fusaka, which is deployed on the Ethereum network. Fusaka gives you like a lot more blobs, so 8 times more once all the blob forks happen, which happens over like the course of a few months. So after that happens, like you have, let's say, made very good progress on the scaling the blobs priority. Then the fork after that, Glamsterdam, was kind of pitched as this is a scaling fork, like we're going to use that to propose like scaling L1 improvements. So there's a few of them. The big one is the headliner for the consensus layer, which is EPBS. So that gives you like a different architecture of the slot where you have more time to execute transactions, which means like you can have bigger blocks essentially. Another one of the headliners, which is the execution layer side one, is block level access list that almost like so every transaction like pre-declares the state accesses that they're doing, and so the clients can optimize around that. For instance, like running stuff in parallel or like keeping the caches hot or stuff like this. And then a third thing that's kind of on the menu is doing like a bunch of repricing. So as you know, like when the EVM executes operations, like you compute that in terms of like gas. So every operation has a cost, but that cost depends on pretty much like the hardware that you're using. And the gas schedule has been like drafted 10 years ago, and so since then there's been improvements. Some things got cheaper, some things got more expensive, and so now there's this effort to like reprice a lot of the opcodes so that you can be closer to the hardware that is being used, and that allows you to like give fairer pricing and also just optimize your resources much better. And so so with like this collection of EIPs, we should actually be able to scale the L1 quite a bit. And then my hope, even though that's not decided and locked in, is that H star, so the fork after Glamsterdam, will be the fork where we have 6-second slots, where we can halve the slot time from like 12 to 6 seconds. And so that fork should be more of a improving UX type of fork. But before that, we'll have like all of these interop protocols and app level or wallet level fixes in place, so we can still make progress even before like the H star fork. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much what I have in mind.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Please go ahead and raise your hands. Keep asking more questions. We have still a lot of time to go. Barnabe doesn't get tired. Shane, yeah.
Had coffee before.
Hey, Barnabe. I saw your Twitter post recently on the $1 trillion security project, and I think in summary, it's like you wouldn't be able to lock up, say, $1 trillion in a single smart contract, which would be having that much trust and faith in said contract that's been audited and is not likely to ever be like hacked and whatnot. I'm guessing this is for like support maybe like traditional finance moving over to Ethereum. For example, we want these guys to have faith in Ethereum, that they can move large sums of money in and out of a contract on a daily basis. And I mean, yes, we have the metric of like 10 years of uptime, things like that. But I'm guessing this huge project, which has 10 different pillars to it, is in service of that. I was curious if that is a correct assessment of why we're doing this.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and the project is led by Frederick, who is in the protocol security team, and Josh Stark, who is part of EF management. And so, as you said, like the idea is that you should feel comfortable like holding very large sums of money on chain. And so they went out and spoke to like many institutions, and not only institutions, I think also just like interest groups of users and things like this, to understand like what are the blockers for people to feel comfortable like putting a lot of assets on chain. And they came up with like a list of different things. off the top of my head, so I think the first one is actually UX. So one thing you might remember is like there was this big hack recently, like Bybit, where they lost, I think, $1.5 billion. And the reason was some sort of man-in-the-middle attack where somebody signed a message that was compromised by an attacker. And there was a few places where you could have improved things by just having clear signing. So be a bit more confident that when you're like pressing the button on your wallet, like you're actually signing the message that you think you're signing. And so yeah, that's one of the initiatives, is to just like try and make sure that at this UX level, what you sign is what you get, or yeah, like that you're like very clear that you don't make these types of mistakes anymore. The next pillar, if I remember correctly, is I think developer experience. So for people to feel comfortable to put a lot of assets on chain, you need the smart contracts to be secure, which means that you need to be able to write them properly and audit them properly as well. So there's a lot of work that you can do there on the compilers, on the formal verification. Yeah, just like improving the level of quality of smart contracts on Ethereum. Another aspect of it, I think, had to do with, let's say, more like the network level properties. So for instance, the centralization of the validator set. So if the validator set is extremely centralized with like just a couple of parties that could collude and get the chain into like a bad spot, for instance, like finalizing something invalid where they steal all the money, the chain can always like, yeah, full nodes can always detect such kinds of things and fork away and everything, but it's still a bit messy, and it can still be a bit of like a thing you have at the back of your head where you're like, I don't know if I would put like so much money on a platform that's controlled by just like a few people. So I think that's also part of the initiative. Like, how do we ensure that that the chain remains decentralized? This is obviously something we all think about, like not just them, but I think it's good to single it out as one of the blockers that people have when they think about it. And then more generally speaking, there's this also general problem of uptime. So how do we ensure that Ethereum never goes down? And this is very much like in the mandate of a protocol security team and other teams at EF.
Yeah, as you were speaking about the consensus layer, to figure out whether or not like collusion could be an issue for ones are these researchers coming up with like these 3 or 4 points. Is like, this is potentially what could be the bigger issues for consensus layer. Are they working with the CL teams and having interops to kind of whiteboard, hey, like this particular edge case, this could happen. Yeah, just kind of curious how to come up with these things.
You mean thinking about like consensus layer issues? I missed
like why these why these particular like 3 or 4 things being the biggest, and how they come up with them as being like the potential worst edge cases.
I think because they just talk to people, and that's what people told them they were the most concerned with, and pretty much that.
And then they could like probably spin up nodes and try to down and see if they really actually could happen. Because I mean, I remember one of them was like, oh, fork choice could get so bad to where like a lot of validators could get slashed. Be obviously, but I'm sure it's relatively difficult to like force that to happen, I guess, with testing.
I think I missed a few bits of your question. I'm sorry, there was a bit of delay, I think.
Oh, I was saying, with fork choice, for example, if it's in such a state to where we had forked on different chains, then you could have different validators getting slashed because they're proposing like invalid blocks. And, that was noted as like one of the things that they were concerned about with the project. We're just curious, do they then go and try to test it out in like something like kurtosis environment? Be like, can we actually force this to happen? Is this like a valid concern?
Yeah, I think there's a general thread around these chaos testnets. So try to put ourselves in like the worst possible conditions, like a chain split or a network split or stuff like this, and then try to recover from this. And one of the triggers or motivations is that this actually happened on one of the test nets for Pictra, and I think it was Oleshki, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there was like a bunch of clients that just didn't talk to one another anymore. Chain wasn't finalizing. It was a big mess, and recovering like the entire thing was actually very painful. And so they realized that, oh, if that happened like in reality, we should probably be prepared for these types of scenarios. And I think now there's going to be like more of these chaos nets where you try to make it as bad as possible and get away from like the abyss. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice PTSD there, Barnabe, mentioning the Pectra testnet situation. Thanks. It was fun.
Yeah. We're in the front line. Yeah.
Nando has a question.
Hi. So you've already mentioned the fast confirmation rule and also the Pectra incident. I would like to, well, maybe you know, how would this fast confirmation rule would have worked with the Pectra incident? The majority of the validator would have signed to a ground fork. So would this fast confirmation rule make the chain finalize and break everything?
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting question. So the fast confirmation rule is like it's a local rule. So it's only based on my node, and my node can tell me if something was finalized or not, as opposed to like full finality, which is a certificate that everybody agrees upon, or everybody who's online at least. And so, yeah, let's say if I was running my node and there was like this chain split with validators voting on different sides, I would probably locally observe that my chain has like 60% of validators missing, for instance. And then I'm not sure the fast confirmation rule would actually allow you to confirm fast, because you would say, I've seen a bunch of votes, but I've also seen like a lot of them missing. And so I don't know that they might come later. And so one of the assumptions of this fast confirmation rule is the network has to be synchronous. And synchrony means if you haven't seen a message by like this amount of time, you assume that it was never sent in the first place. But yeah, with a chain split, I think the fast confirmation would not allow you to, or maybe it would actually. So yeah. So if you assume that it's synchronous and you're not getting like messages from 60% of these validators, you would assume that they never sent it in the first place, and so that they're not going to like equivocate or make you unconfirm the thing that you confirmed. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. There's a bunch of math in that paper. You can just like plug in the parameters of how many people voted and your belief of like the size of an adversary, and it tells you whether you would confirm in that case or not. It's possible that you would. Yeah, I think it's a nice exercise actually to try and work out.
I will try to do it. I had also another question that it is related to the 6-second slots and the DVT. So, and has any DVT client raised any concern about the 6-second slot, because maybe they will struggle to propose new blocks or attestate?
Yeah. So I don't think it was definitely raised at some point. So one thing that we are looking into is if you shorten like the slot time, like how much time should you give to attestation versus aggregation to ensure that nobody is left out and you still give enough time for the network. So what we've observed, there was like a pretty nice like piece from Maria from RIG on ETH research. Is there are some attestations that are actually like would be coming late given the repartitioning that we would do for 6 seconds. And so the game now is to try and ensure that we can just level up the quality of people on the network to make sure that they actually get their attestations in time. Why we feel somewhat confident doing this is we actually looked at who was sending stuff late. And when there was like very clearly something that was very late, we always could find a reason, which was like, oh, they misconfigured something, or actually we found like this networking improvement that just makes things hop faster around the network. So far, I think we are confident that there isn't like a specific use case that would be, oh, sorry, DVTs, like you cannot attest because you'll be too slow for the network. I think we still like a lot more testing on this anyways. And nowadays, like the testing and analysis resources are mostly looking at Glamsterdam, but yeah, from the top of my head, it wasn't actually DVTs themselves who were the slowest participant on the network. It was some staking provider that had this remote signing thing that was slower than it should be, if I remember correctly. But yeah, we have like this data set of validators labeled by which pools they belong to, so we can also know who is like a DVT and who would be maybe slower in that case. But it didn't come up in the data, so I think that's not an issue.
Perfect. Thank you for the answer.
Okay, thank you for diving into that. And more questions coming. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Dimitris.
Yeah. Sorry, comrades. Okay. Yeah. It's a thing also previous about you said, like why network was called.
I'm not sure if it's just me, but
No,
we can't hear you properly. Yeah. Maybe try without camera, Dimitris.
Or not?
Yeah, Dimitri, your voice is cutting off completely. You might wanna leave and join again.
Yeah, sorry about that. So when you are running the supernode on the same network as your Jitsi call, right?
Sorry, now?
I think we just still hear every other word.
Maybe just text the question, I guess.
We'll try.
Yep.
Text.
Yeah, please write it into comments here, post it, we can read it, or in the Discord chat. And meanwhile, please raise your hand for more questions. Normally I get more to chat with these guests, but I'm glad you have so many questions for Barnabe, so keep it coming. Shane.
Yeah, I understand that. And like we said, it's Lusaka, we're going to get PeerDAS, so that's blobs. And then in Glamsterdam, we'll get dealing with EPBS and balls. Then we'll get some pretty good UX benefits with 6-second slots following. I'm just curious, like if anywhere censorship resistance, like Fossil kind of falls in and where that's falling.
Yeah, actually, there's going to be like a fairly important debate, I guess, tomorrow on ACDC, which is do we actively schedule Fossil for being included in Glamsterdam or do we not? And then I guess the implication would be that it would go in H star. My personal preference is actually to schedule Fossil for H star along with 6-second slot. I think it would be a pretty good combo because Fossil has already been fairly well tested and implemented. So I think we're pretty clear on how it works at this point. 6-second slot is conceptually not very difficult, even if it's actually pretty difficult to like implement right because of like the transition from 12 to 6. But yeah, if we did schedule Fossil for like Glamsterdam, the expectation is that it would add at least 2 more months of delay to the fork. I think it might be an underestimation, to be honest. Like EPBS is such a big chunk and Fossil is also not that small either. I kind of feel like we will maybe bite off more than we can chew with this. And I think it's much better for us to have a good fork cadence, like ship things regularly. Like the more you delay the fork, the later you can enjoy the benefits of what the fork brings. So I think EPBS, block level access list, like these are things that can give us very tangible benefits very quickly. So I think it's best to just like ship them and then wait until H star for fossil and 6-second slots. That would be my personal preference.
Yeah, so we'll still prioritize it and very likely in one of the two next forks. And yeah, very good points on whether or not fossils should go into either Amsterdam or HSTAR. See it, yeah, both ways. Like with EPBS, we're adding a new timing committee, the PTC, and then also with fossil, you would add in a new committee. And my understanding is if you were to do both in the same upgrade, you would design it as such where they would be the same committee that would solve both situations. I think that the con then, like you're saying, not just that like it would take longer to implement by a couple months, actually agreeing on the proper spec of how you would do both would take a lot of back and forth and probably be the thing that takes the most actual time. And I do have a feeling that something like 6-second slots is going to be lighter on the CL. So then implementing something a little bit heavier like fossil would give us the leeway for that. So that just makes sense. We'll see what happens tomorrow then. Cool.
Okay, very well. We got the question from Dimitris in Discord, so let me read that quickly. Is there a strategy to maintain the validator set decentralized while few entities, e.g. financial institutions, hold a very large percentage of staked ETH? Is there an actual danger that they veto some upcoming update that harms their interests?
Yeah, that's a topic that I thought about a lot with other people as well. I think there's a couple of questions there that are interesting to think about. So one of them is the role of a validator. So today they do a lot of things, like they attest, they produce blocks, they will also do fossil lists maybe in the future. One of the things that I've been thinking about is this idea of like rainbow staking, where you can try to essentially have like a division of labor so that you just assign the functions to the people who can best provide them. And maybe in that sense, you actually really only need like a very decentralized set of people to do fossil, because they are the ones who inject like this chain neutrality into the ledger, which is important. You need a fairly decentralized set of attesters because, yeah, people voting on the chain, like that's important. And then you might be fine with like a more centralized set of block proposers or builders, for instance. There's limits to that. Like I don't want to say everything flies, but that's, let's say, one possible strategy. The reason why that might be palatable is because one of the benefits you get from like a smaller validator set is that you can get faster finality, and there's a cost to not having faster finality. And I think on the trade-off curve so far, like we are very far into eating a lot of the costs of not having faster finality, but not getting so much benefit from having like such a large validator set either. So I think it's interesting to revisit that. And there's also the other perspective, which is that the validator set cannot really impose their view of a network by themselves. A full node can always like descend and exit and just restart. It's easier said than done, obviously, because it takes a lot of work to do this. But yeah, I think that's one thing. The other thing is that even though that's true, that like you can always verify the chain, even if the validators are like colluding to try to deceive you about the state of the chain. I think it is true that, yeah, if there's a few validators who are very well financialized, very close to like financial institutions, let's say digital asset treasuries and staked ETFs and this type of stuff, it can change like the politics or the political economy of the network as a whole. And it's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that these are people who use the network and who are operators and who maintain it. The question is like, are their incentives like sufficiently aligned with just network stability and network neutrality and network permanence and innovation and things like this? So if you have like a validator set that's just like extremely conservative and doesn't want to do anything, that can be an issue. If you have a validator set that wants to do things that are completely opposite to like what the broader community wants, that can also be an issue. Yeah, it's tricky. I still think we should be aiming for a smaller validator set while keeping the entry as permissionless as possible. I think that's a good way of keeping the system in check. You can have fewer entities, but as long as they can be replaced. I think that might be a good middle point.
Thank you for the answer there. Yeah, that's a tough question. With the thank you for handling that. Awesome. Okay, we get the last 5 minutes, so maybe if we have one quick question from the audience, anyone wants to take the opportunity. That was quick. Shari, go ahead.
Uh, so you mentioned that shorter slot times will be something that one of the upcoming Beacon Chain folks will be like we'll plan for it. Uh, I'm wondering, and that's something that was proposed in the Lean consensus efforts. I'm wondering if more stuff from the Lean consensus efforts, say PQ signatures, uh, and some other stuff from the lean stuff, will that be coming towards Beacon Chain folks? Is that something that we're thinking?
Yeah. So yeah, actually, when we say shorter slot times, like there's different, I guess, graduation. It's like it depends how short you want them to be. So Lean consensus, I think the target was like 4-second slots, and the idea is this is like very small, and it's good to get to that level. What we're proposing as like an iterative change is 6-second slots. I personally believe that we can go even shorter than 4 seconds, and we currently have like some work done by the consensus team on decoupling the block time from the attestations and the finality accumulation, let's say. And that would allow you to commit blocks pretty fast while building up like the finality on top of it. So like decoupling these two things, which is currently like a blocker to get really short slots. So yeah, in a sense, some of the goals that, let's say, we all have a goal of shortening the slot time. Like the question is, how do you do that and when? I personally think it'd be good to do like one iterative step already as soon as possible to get to 6 seconds. I think it would show the willingness to do this sort of stuff. You would also actually have like very tangible improvements. You would just have more responsivity when you transact. MEV markets would become a bit better. But yeah, long run, I also think we should be aiming for even shorter than 4 seconds. I think the number I was flying around recently was 2 seconds as a sweet spot between long enough that we can allow broad network participation, but also short enough that we get like pretty good benefits. So yeah, I think that could be a nice goal.
Thank you so much, Barnabe. That's interesting. I mean, the bandwidth there is tough, and like even 2 seconds. I mean, it sounds like we need to optimize a lot to get there. So, yeah, thank you so much. We get the last few minutes, and before we finish, I wanted to also ask one more quick question about something that you learned along the years, some advice to the fellows here, people who just sort of started their journey now, and now finishing the fellowship, they're going to be more independent. So what is something that they should know, something that maybe you wish you knew at the time when you were starting your journey? Any advice for the fellows?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, I think, maybe more on like a personal level. I feel like the crypto space moves extremely fast. Like when you open Twitter, there's a lot of different conversations. Like every week, it's a different thing that people are chasing after. The main thing where I got burnt is sometimes feeling like, oh, this is a sprint and I need to run after like many different things. I think it's actually more interesting to build progressively, like take time to really go deep on one of the protocol components. Like the protocol as a whole is very large and there's many different parts to it. Become an expert on like one of them, and then just like build out your domain expertise from there. Just like start to radiate further and further. It doesn't mean that you should be slow. I think it's still good that you think about the urgency to ship big things and to improve the protocol and to, just generally speaking, like a lot of people now depend on Ethereum. A lot of users want changes, features, etc. So I think it's important to realize that we're in a bit of a special position to achieve these things that have like major impact. So the urgency is important, but at the same time, personally taking the time to just understand things well, carve your niche, and then expand from there. Don't try to like hop on so many different things all at once.
Yeah, especially today with the protocol growing so much, it's more about becoming expert in the various areas and collaborating, because it's just so big. You can, I think, like, yeah, when we had the roadmap of the boxes, I always say, like, you can spend your life in one of those boxes, basically. I mean, it's a big protocol now, and we are exactly at 1 hour, so I think we can wrap it up here. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us today, Barnabe. Thank you so much for all your insightful answers, all your advice, all your knowledge that you shared with us today.
Thank you.
And yeah, it was great. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining for our last AMA office hours. So this was the very end of our guests during the EPF. And in the next office hours, we will have the presentations from the fellows. We will hear from you guys for a change to see your final presentations. So I look forward to that next week. And then I'll see you all in Buenos Aires. So yeah, see you next week. And thank you so much again, everyone. It was great having you for one more AMA. So bye and have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. See you there.
You guys.
Bye.
All right.